Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to Opera 101 with Cleveland Opera Theater. My name is Megan Thompson and I'm the Director of Education and Outreach for the company. Every day we discuss one aspect of opera to help our listeners better understand and appreciate the art form. It's for all ages, so you'll see a variety of topics from things for the very, very new listener to the opera seasoned listener. And if you ever have a question or would like to hear us talk about a specific topic, I invite you to go ahead and place that in the comments on this video, or you can email it to us, send us a Facebook message. Basically, any way you can possibly communicate with us is a fine way to submit questions. We always love to hear what you're interested in hearing about. Though we have no problem talking about the things we're interested about, as I'm sure you've noticed. So thank you so much for coming. I appreciate you joining me this afternoon. Last week, I was speaking on the topic of famous living opera singers. And while I was going through some of the most famous names that we're really seeing all over the world right now, it was definitely very white heavy. There's a lot of whiteness, and this is definitely a problem throughout the art form. I mean, it's an art form that was created in Italy in the 1500s or 1600s rather, and so obviously there's a very specific person who is in Italy at this point. That said, though, the challenge has been throughout the years how to change that. How do we bring more Black singers to light? How do we really highlight the amazing talent we have through all races? And so I will get into more of that next week. Next week will be a slightly more political on the topic of racism and people of color in the operatic world. Today, I'd rather just focus on celebrating some of the best and most notable African-American singers in the repertoire. And originally, when I started this project and started my research, I was going to focus strictly on living singers. And I still am going to speak primarily about living singers, but I realized there are a couple of very notable singers who have already passed that we should at least mention during today's discussion, so I will bring them up too. And I will also say that if this is a topic that is interesting to you, there are a lot of resources out there where you can research the contributions that African Americans and people of color have made to the art form. And by the way, you'll notice I often will say Black singers rather than African American, strictly because sometimes I'm referring to skin color, not necessarily heritage. And so I sometimes will say African American if that is the heritage that someone is associated with or identifies as, but sometimes I will simply say Black or a person of color if maybe they don't publicly acknowledge a specific heritage. Just trying to be as respectful as possible, since clearly I'm very white. So, and the other thing is just, mind you, there's always more to learn on any topic, but especially this one. This one gets very deep. So definitely go do some of your own research if you're interested. I'm just going to try to hit some highlights in this topic. So in trying to narrow down, I ended up with 40 pages of notes originally, and since that would be far too much for a quick Opera 101 session, I tried to scale it way back. So I'm not going to get into depth about some of the singers that you probably already know and love, like Denise Graves, Jessie Norman, Leontine Price, Shirley Verrett, Audra McDonald. I'm hoping you already know and love these folks. If you don't, go look them up because they're all amazing. They all have made significant contributions to the art form, to the struggle to get more Black singers into leading roles in large houses. They are just amazing singers. But I want to look a little bit past that into some of the singers you may not be familiar with yet. And so, like I said, I was going to focus strictly on living singers, but I want to acknowledge a couple of the pioneers in the movement. So, and forgive me if I mispronounce anyone's names, but Ciceretta Jones was the first African-American woman to ever sing at Carnegie Hall. She headlined a concert there all the way back in 1893. She also sang at Madison Square Garden. She was conducted by Dvorak himself. So huge, huge step in the right direction for getting some more equal rights, but obviously because there was a lot of segregation in opera, there were also a lot of a lot of houses that wouldn't allow her to sing there, wouldn't allow her to perform. In fact, so from 1896 to 1915, she toured with the Black Patty Troubadours. She was known as Black Patty after an Italian singer, not something she enjoyed. She did not want to be known by that moniker, but it really stuck with her throughout her career, and so she just tried to make the most of it. So they did a lot of vaudeville acts, and then at the end of every act, they would close with a staged operatic aria that she sang. And so sadly, this was really her only chance of being an opera singer in this country because of the segregation. Moving forward a little bit, another star that you just absolutely have to know, Marian Anderson. Hopefully you're already familiar with this name. She was one of the most famous contraltos of all time, but she's really well known for being the first Black singer at the Metropolitan Opera, Black soloist anyway. So in 1955, she starred in Verdi's Un ballo in Mascara, and so she just huge. This is what really paved the way for future African Americans and Black singers to be starring roles at the Metropolitan Opera. So as we go through, we also then see Camilla Williams, soprano. She was the first African American to ever receive a regular contract with a major American opera company. That was the New York Opera Company, the New York City Opera. She was the very first Black singer to sing with the Vienna State Opera. She was the first Black African-American appointed professor of voice at Indiana University. So these are huge landmarks in the field toward equality. Again, still not equal. We'll talk about that more next week, though. So then going through, we have some notable folks, and a lot of the folks I'm going to list are still alive. There are a couple who have passed, but they're recent enough that I want to still mention them and bring them up. Simon Estes, bass baritone. He was born back in 1938, so his career really peaked like in the 60s, 70s. He was performing all over for all of the great political figures of the time. People like Bill Clinton, Desmond Tutu, Nelson Mandela have heard this man sing. Excuse me. He's also sung all over the world in a number of really prestigious European houses specifically. So La Scala, the Hamburg State Opera, Vienna State Opera. These are just a few of the places where he's had these leading roles. He was the first Black man to ever sing a leading role at the Bayreuth Festival. He sang the title role in Wagner's The Flying Dutchman, which I was actually listening to before I started this. I had to pause my recording. And so again, really just like paving the way, really a pioneer. We have George Shirley. He was a tenor. He was a Detroit native actually. And in 1955, and this is, I should actually clarify, he's really notable not just for becoming a performing singer, but also for some of the other strides he made in this battle of equality. So in 1955, he was the first African-American to serve as a high school music teacher in Detroit, which was, you know, it seems not that big, but it's huge. He was the first Black singer to ever win the Met Opera National Council auditions in 1961. First tenor, African-American tenor to sing a leading role at the Met. He went on to sing 28 different roles in 26 different operas during his time at the Metropolitan Opera. So that's huge. It's wonderful. He ended up actually getting presented the National Medal of the Arts back in 2015 when President Obama was still in office. Grace Bunbury, another great mezzo-soprano. She really mastered the bel canto technique. That's what she's really known for. And then she really stood out because she made the transition from mezzo-soprano to high soprano. Not something a lot of folks do. But again, performed at all sorts of notable opera houses, you know, the Metropolitan Opera, Royal Opera House, La Scala, Philadelphia Lyric Opera, and then many, many more. And she actually has sung even across the country, around the world, etc. And then again, 2009, she was one of the ones honored with the Kennedy Center honors for her many different contributions in the performing arts. So I see lots of comments. Yeah. Oh, yep. I love this. Thank you, Valerie, for tagging Trinity. perfect, and Audra is amazing. I definitely agree with that. We have so many talented people. It's impossible to cover everybody. I'm going to go more to like the younger end for a moment. Janae Bridges is a younger mezzo-soprano in the repertoire. She actually, super talented person. She chose to pursue music over basketball when she got to college. And so she got her master's of music from Curtis after going to the Manhattan School of Music for her undergrad. And now she works in all sorts of repertoire, but I think she's really been making her name by doing a lot of newer works, but then still some of the real classic repertoire like Carmen. And so definitely one of those more on the up and coming side of the singers. She's definitely a person that you should know if you don't already. Russell Thomas, tenor. So he's an interesting person because he didn't actually decide to even pursue opera until he was 18. And around that time, his music teacher was like, hey, you know, what you doing? And pushed him to pursue opera. And so since then, he has performed, again, all over the world. Metropolitan Opera, the Deutsche Oper Berlin, the Royal Opera House, many others, just really like just out there. Janae Brugger, a little older. She probably wouldn't want to be called a young artist anymore, but on the younger end of the spectrum. Won the Met Opera National Council auditions back in 2012. Also won that same year the Zarzuela Prize. It was the prize of the public at Operalia, the World Opera Competition. So she's really been again getting into all sorts of different roles all over the world. You've probably seen her actually in some of the recordings on YouTube because she's one of the folks that has been really popping up more in the newer works and such. Here's a name I mentioned last week, but so notable I have to bring him up again. Lawrence Brownlee, again, tenor, but he's just so prolific already. He's got quite a bit of his career still ahead of him, but right now he's really well known for taking on these crazy challenging roles in the repertoire, including Tonio in The Daughter of the Regiment, which includes that famous aria that has 9 high C's in it. So it's, you know, just any tenor who can sing this well is just amazing. And then the other thing that he did that really kind of got him some attention is while he was at the Metropolitan Opera, he actually took the high F in the recent run or recent performance of I Puritani, which is not something a lot of tenors are willing to do. High F is kind of crazy. So that's where he's really making it his niche is like these high, crazy tenor roles. He's actually really well known for the Count in Barber of Seville, but he's also done God only knows how many other roles already. And he's just really, you know, he's one of those, keep an eye on him, see where he goes, because he's definitely going down in history. He's already making history. And I'm not sure if I'm saying her name correctly. Pretty Yend. So if anybody else knows, feel free to comment and correct me here. But again, winning all sorts of competitions and prizes all over the world, including the first prize in the Vincenzo Bellini International Competition. She's just a crazy, amazing coloratura soprano. Go look her up. Has won first prize, and I started to list all of them, and I was like, well, this is just getting silly. So many competitions. But again, known for like Marie and the Daughter of the Regiment. In fact, if you saw the Met Live production, that was her. You should have also seen her. Oh gosh, she's done Rosina rather in Barber of Seville. That's actually probably the role she's best known for at this point. But pretty much any of those coloratura roles for a younger soprano is probably something she sings. She has just an amazing voice, amazing repertoire. We have John Holliday, countertenor. Don't hear many countertenors, huh? He actually was first introduced to opera in the 90s after he saw mezzo-soprano Denise Graves sing with the Houston Symphony. And it was at that moment that he really fell in love with the art form and decided he wanted to pursue this. So he ended up eventually graduating from the University of Cincinnati, the Conservatory of Music. He did an apprenticeship program with Santa Fe Opera, but now he's performed definitely all over the country. I can't remember if he's made his international debut yet, but he has quite a career here in the States for sure. Morris Robinson, bass. We have another great, amazing singer who was not actually planning to become an opera singer. I love these stories because it's a little more similar to my own. I didn't become an opera singer until I was almost 20. So I love these stories. Morris was actually going to college. He was actually planning for college football. He bypassed music. He turned down music scholarships so he could play football. That was his whole thing. And then even after he graduated, he didn't quickly go back to music. He actually started working for a Fortune 500 company. And it wasn't until he was about 30 that he actually started pursuing a career. And this is the other thing was just great. He auditioned for the chorus for Boston Lyric Opera. And instead of getting chorus, he actually was given a solo role because his voice was just so outstanding. So definitely another great singer to look up. Almost done here, I promise, but a couple more notable people that you should go look up on YouTube if you don't know them already. Taylor Raven, mezzo-soprano, definitely another one of our up-and-coming artists. She's done a lot with LA Opera, actually. She's won countless awards, including first place in the Denver Lyric Opera Guild competition in 2015. Definitely somebody to keep an eye on because she's still she is truly a young artist right now, but just already making a huge splash. So somebody to really see where she ends up. And then finally, Russell Thomas, a tenor, has performed leading roles all over the world. Metropolitan Opera, Los Angeles Opera, English National, all over the place. And he's really known for his niche in the Italian repertoire. He's really been doing a great job with anything he sings, but really specifically like the Italian rep. Most recent to the time that the article I was reading about him was he had just premiered in Norma. And I think it was in Chicago that he had done that role. And it was, you know, kind of like the thing that really caught everybody's attention. So, like I said, certainly not an exhaustive list. If this is a topic that's interesting to you and you want to learn more about African American and Black singers who are currently performing, there are tons of articles out there. There's lots of highlights, and there are a lot of really notable historic singers from the late 1800s through like the mid 1900s that you should really know if you don't already. So I highly encourage you to do your own research, but hopefully I've provided a good starting point so you have a few people to go and look up yourself. And otherwise, next week we will talk a lot more about how people of color are represented or not represented, as the case may be, here in the States or around the world in operatic literature. So if you have questions, comments, concerns, requests, this is a great place to drop your comments and questions. And otherwise, you're welcome to email us, let us know. Make sure you've liked our Facebook page. Make sure you go and subscribe to our mailing list at clevelandoperatheater.org. That way you will be kept apprised of all of the other Opera Online events. We have all sorts of fun stuff, including the release of some awesome education materials that are coming out tomorrow. So make sure you're on our mailing list so you get that straight to your inbox, whether you have young learners by age or young novices who are adults. So look forward to talking to you more. Have a great afternoon, and make sure you tune in again tomorrow at 12:15 for Opera 101. Bye.